peak.
The latest data show another rise in COVID.
Hello and welcome to In the News Right Now.
On the show this week, we're joined by Fred and Richard Fairbrass of Right Said Fred.
And regular contributor, journalist Lewis Brackpool.
As usual, we'll be talking about the major news stories of the week and asking our panel how they feel these events will have impact on all of us.
First of all, we'll be discussing an Australian bill that has opened the door to forced vaccinations.
Justin Trudeau has allowed China to open their own police stations in Canada.
Russia has denounced Zelensky's comments about preemptive strikes, something that's now escalated with the bombing of the Crimea Bridge and missile attacks on Ukraine.
And Sharon Osbourne has publicly agreed with Kanye West in his comments about BLM being a scam.
Let's start with Richard and Fred. The idea of forced vaccination, that sends chills down your spine, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, this went into, this started before COVID, didn't it? The suggestion that that you can, a certain dedicated health expert can force jab. This from 2015 in Western Australia, I think, and it does, it opens the door to some very bad behaviour. It's, I think I've got something on here. Yeah, there's basically there's a law. I don't think it's I think it's from, there was a list of it from 2015. And there's some debate as to whether it's law or not, and whether it's under the Health Act or whether there is such a thing as the COVID Legislation Act. There seems to be a bit of debate about that, but I'm not that clued up on the difference between the two.
There was a time in America when you were fined $1 if you didn't agree to a polio jab.
Really?
Back in the day, yeah.
I didn't know that.
So I think the history of the state stepping in and claiming the sovereignty over your children or your own body is actually quite a long-established position. So what I think is interesting about what's happening now is that we're beginning to see it for what it is, much more clearly than we did before. They actually talk in one of these articles about the removal of children's underwear being done with sensitivity.
Yes. Yeah.
Just the very fact of that, just the idea of that is so repugnant and so revolting. And if we're not careful, I think it's this salami slicing of your morals, if you like, and of your a sense of decency and all that. It's salami slicing to the point where you don't think it's weird if an official from the government comes in and tries to take the underwear off your child. For me, that is an extraordinary slip.
It's a very deep,
it's a very deep place that you go into. So I think we have to be really careful. And I won't have done that long for too long, but I think
too late.
But it's the same with schooling and the way that children are encouraged when they go to when they go to school to have the jab and all that kind of stuff, and parents are getting very, very agitated about it. My feeling is take your kids away from school. You cannot trust.
Not every family.
No, I realise that. But you can't trust the state with your child. It's just not possible.
No,
you can't trust the state with your health any longer. The NHS, despite the numerous adverse effects that are well publicised now, is still pumping out pro-vaccination propaganda. So the NHS can no longer be trusted, I think. So this
in that regard.
So in Australia, they use the word experts, officials.
Well, who's that lady? Jane Halton or June Halton, who's a health expert, and which she's
what
talking
does that
about.
Mean?
Yeah, she's talking about we have to achieve COVID stable. What the hell's that?
Yes.
Well, this is the thing. We've seen Dr. Aseem Malhotra just published a peer-reviewed paper. He's the Surgeon General of Florida just came out a couple of days ago and said there's a massive increase in risk for 18 to 24-year-old males having the jab. So with that new information, I find it weird that they haven't they're still pushing out the propaganda to get vaccinated this year. And when we spoke to our friends in Australia on the Australian special the other week, they hadn't really heard of all these studies of negative side effects. So Lewis, what do you think? Do you think we're actually going to hear more from mainstream media say, about what the Surgeon General said, what Dr. Aseem Malhotra said?
I mean, one can hope, because we know what the mainstream media are like. We've we've obviously seen how they've treated and created their own class of people, the unvaccinated, over the past few years. And it's interesting with the Australia scenario, because when I went to Davos and reported what was happening there with the World Economic Forum, I spoke a little bit about Paul Kagame, who's the president for Rwanda, and how him and particular police forces were actually forcing vaccinations in rural areas. And speaking about that, even the government spokespeople went after me on Twitter, and obviously to shut down dissent, they call you a racist, of course, to try and stop you from speaking about it. And you naturally think, well, a Western country wouldn't do these sort of things. They wouldn't, forcefully or have the legislation to be able to go into other people's homes and take them out and throw them in a quarantine camp. But unfortunately, this is kind of the reality. So, like you said, I don't think that we're going to be seeing something from the mainstream media, not just even about the Australia scenario, but of course the new data that's been rolling out, like you mentioned, Leilani. But I think the natural question to ask is there a cause for concern for other Western countries to come now that Australia is implementing these draconian measures once again?
Well, it sets a precedent, doesn't it? I think the other thing as well is people, when they hear like emergency, think, oh, it's just an emergency legislation, so it will only happen in the case of an emergency. And people just kind of go, oh, that's all right. Then if it's an emergency, it's an emergency. And you don't actually think, well, actually, but they can declare an emergency whenever they want.
Yeah.
You can literally at any point you can, and it doesn't even need to be related, because Joe Biden's saying, right, there's a state of emergency with a hurricane, so the best thing to do is go out and get vaccinated. It wouldn't make any sense. No. It's insane. But one positive thing, actually, and I was going to ask you, Richard and Fred, if you've kind of noticed this, that actually older people that generally are kind of conditioned to be more trusting of the media, probably more trusting of government and stuff like that. They went out and got their 2 jabs, they went and got their third and whatever. When I saw a news article last week where basically they're not going for their boosters, they're not turning up. Right. These are people that have had 3 and 4 that are just saying, no, I'm not doing it. And even though the propaganda is the same, go out and get your flu jab and go and get your COVID jab, they're just not doing it. Are you noticing that people that that kind of had 3 are now going,
yes,
I'm done?
Yeah. There's quite a few people that we know that have been quite unwell after their first booster, so their 3rd jab, and the 4th is just not on the table anymore. They're not interested, and I think with people talk about this, the English are a bit compliant and we're not out on the streets. I think there's a part of the English which is like kind of shoulder shrugging. They won't necessarily go out in force, but they'll just go, no, I'm done with that. Thanks very much. I'm moving on, and I think the take up is getting lower and lower because people are just beginning to think, actually, I really shouldn't need this every year, 2 or 3 times a year or twice a year for it to remain effective. Exactly. So I think there's a huge distrust, and also I think Brexit created a huge distrust within politicians, and I think although initially people believed what they were saying at the beginning of the pandemic, I think that's now unravelled, and we know that people are very, very distrustful of. Matt Hancock, lowered the bar, and so did Johnson, and now people are looking at Truss and Gove and all these others, just thinking, well, I don't believe these people. Yeah,
I think the level of trust that's the most for me. It's one of the most dangerous things about this whole event, which is that nobody has behaved with honour or class or honesty. No. They just haven't. Nobody. The press, medical science by and large. The politicians, the whole thing, police, everything has been undermined by a sense of duplicity. It's just really, really, and I think it's really bad. For me, the minute you saw coppers wearing a camera, I just thought this is not good, because what it indicates is you do not believe what the copper tells you. So therefore, it indicates a mistrust between the people they serve and us. And I think the same is with the Australian thing. I think that what's weird about Australia, it has one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, and they're still pushing further vaccinations. So what does that tell you? They don't work. Well, in actual fact, I think they are working. I think the vaccinations are working. They're doing exactly what they're designed to do, which is to hurt people. I don't believe they were ever designed They were designed for two reasons. One, to make people like Fauci and Gates bucket loads of money, and secondly, I think there's a strong argument for this depopulation scenario, which I didn't believe. I didn't believe it at all. But the more I look at it, when they're talking about vaccinating pregnant women, kids, what is that? I mean, particularly when the science shows that children, particularly very young children, are almost completely immune to this thing. So you have to find, you have to look into your heart and think, okay, so what, if it looks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck, I think we're not seeing the elephant in the room a lot of the time with this. And also, I'll stop rattling on in a minute, but the thing with the virus is that people have stopped thinking for themselves. In all of the stuff that we were looking at in terms of the Australian situation, not once is there any mention of healthy lifestyles, vitamins, exercise, sunshine, walking, all the stuff that's good for the immune system. Nobody's talking about it. What they're talking about is needles and vaccines. So what does that tell you? It tells you that that's where the money is. That's your cui bono. Who benefits?
So you mentioned earlier that the Times wrote an article saying that all of us against having the COVID jab were menaces. So there's been a lot of this name calling with this narrative and with other narratives right away. Do you think people are still falling for that and getting offended by the name calling that happens at the start?
Well, the only one thing I will say is we, in our sort of daily life, going to the gym and walking up and down the high street and stuff, we have people coming up to us at least once a day saying, thank you very much for what you're saying, carry on the good work, blah, blah, blah. So I think there's a whole tranche of people silent majority who know deep in their gut that something is not right, but they're just not saying it. That's the only difference.
I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but the haters online do not manifest themselves in the street at all.
No, that's true. Very, very true. Lewis, I actually saw because this is what you've just said there, Richard, actually, and it's just planted in my head, that you think that there's a depopulation aspect to it. And I must admit, I kind of early doors, people just thought, look, they're making loads of money. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, but they've also got loads of money anyway.
That's true.
I saw a tweet from Bob's Cartoons, and he was basically saying that if it was about money, they could have just used saline. They could have just used water. And that would have been better, because then it would have been 100% safe. You know what I mean? Everyone would have, I've had 8 of these things and I'm fine. And they could have made a bucket load of cash, but instead they made it in such a way that they are killing people. And so, there's a more sinister part of that, I think. But Lewis, for your age, because obviously you're younger than the rest of us, I've been surprised how young people have bought into the whole vaccine and that kind of stuff. Are you starting to see a change among sort of your generation and younger?
Yeah, I think so. I really do think so. When I speak to people around the similar age, they kind of go, well, you hear the classic, I just, took it just so I can go on holiday, the classic line that I sort of hear from people my sort of generation. But I think there is a shift, because people have sort of woken up and gone, you know what, there is something a bit weird about this, because we were told that you weren't going to get COVID when you take it, but I'm still getting COVID. And then I'm being told that, if you take this, you'll have your freedoms back. But then now everything's opened up, and even someone like me who's unvaccinated, I can now go to Canada, and they were pretty harsh, to say the least, when it came to lockdowns and mandates. So, yeah, I think there is a shift from people that felt lied to. I think not everyone's completely on that train. I think a lot of it is to do with ego and to do with pride. There's a lot of narcissism in my generation. So there's this strange pride. So when you say to them, look, mate, I think you were wrong. I think you might have, made like the wrong decision there. I think they sort of buckle up and dig their heels in sometimes when they don't want to admit they're wrong. But I think there is a shift. However, it's just they're not being true to themselves, and they're not openly saying it.
And do you think there's a bit of resentment there? Because, as you said, you can do everything now. I can do everything that I wanted to do. I can go on holiday where I want to. And they took it to go on holiday, say. So do you feel there's some resentment there that it's like, you didn't do it and I did? And
Yeah, Yeah, no, completely. I think there's almost like a bit of jealousy. Like, what did you see that I didn't? What were you looking for? What were you looking at to make you change your mind and not want to get it? And really, it's just a case of 99.7% survivability, and that's what sort of swayed me from the very beginning. Before they even started rolling things out, when that sort of data started coming out on, I believe even Fox News showed a glimpse of that, and then obviously took it down. But it got everyone questioning, especially in online circles, and everyone sort of went, well, in my age group, if it's the survivability rate is so ridiculously high, according to what they're saying, then what's the point of even having something? So that kind of sort of got the ball rolling to start with. But the people who thought, oh, well, this is going to be, it'll be like a yellow fever vaccine where you go to Asian countries. It's not the case. And I think there is a massive amount of resentment. And it's such a shame, because you should be able to just go, do you know what? I did make a mistake. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make wrong decisions, because it's about learning. But unfortunately, there is an ulterior and sinister motive underneath all of it. And it's such a big shame.
I agree. I think this has been going on. It's the massaging that's been going on in terms of compliance goes way back. What we're looking at is that we're obsessed with the last 2 years or the last 2.5 years, whatever it is. But actually, it goes way back. For me, it goes back to seatbelts. It goes back to little stickers on the floor at the ATM telling you how to stand. It tells you. It goes back to the thing that slides across the cigarettes in the supermarket because you're not even allowed to look at them. We have been trained to defer to the state for safety, for knowledge, for information, for everything. And Jacinda Ardern, when she said, we are the sole source of truth, if you remember that comment. This has been going on for a long, long time. This is not something new, but this is the hypothesis of it, if you like. But we've been trained, and I mean, someone was talking about classrooms the other day. The degree to which don't run down the corridor. If you want to go down the corridor, move on the left, not on the right. It's this sense of being trained the whole time, and not being encouraged to use our own God-given intellect at any point.
It's the Tony Benn thing, isn't it?
It is.
A well-fed, well-educated public is a danger.
It's hard to control. Absolutely. Yeah. It's absolutely true.
Another one of those in terms of changing the way that people think, like you're talking about over the period of decades, they become a bit of a nanny state basically. So you're looking now to the state to protect you and keep you safe. Is schools. Like when I look at a school now, it's with all the bars around it and all the fences around it. Like I did a bit of work for the Arts Council years and years ago, and I went to a young offenders, and I remember thinking how crazy it looked because you've got kids in this building and it's surrounded by all this fencing. But that's what schools look like now. That's what normal schools, or so-called normal schools look like now. And you think that's conditioning those kids for when they grow up. It's extraordinary, really. Lewis, then I'll start with you with this one, because obviously you formerly, used to work for Rebel News. They're Canada-based. The Canadian government have allowed the Chinese Communist Party to open police stations in the country to spy on Chinese citizens, which is extraordinary to me. Well, what's your take on that?
Well, Trudeau loves the Chinese dictatorship. I think he said that in an interview about 8 years ago, before he was elected, where he explained that China's basic dictatorship sort of gets the country moving in terms of economy and green policies and things like that. So for me to see that, it's actually not a bit of a shock to see that. But I think what's shocking about all of it is not only, I think I saw the photo of them all in a room tracking and seeing the citizens on screen, like something out of if Soviet Russia was set in the future. What's more shocking is I read that it's not just Canada. I think this is actually becoming a worldwide thing, across Europe and in the UK, is what I was reading earlier. And so that sort of sets the precedent, really, isn't it? Because the Chinese who don't want to live under this communist rule, the CCP, who decide to move to Western countries to get away from that, they move in that respect for freedom, whatever that means nowadays. We're not 100% sure on that, especially in the West. But in comparison to China, our sort of continents within Europe, Americas, show that kind of basic freedom sort of blueprint. So to have them to come here, say in the UK or to Canada, and then to still be tracked via their government just in case that they do something wrong, to me is absolutely sinister in that sense. I think that's putting it politely. I mean, you have embassies in countries where if you go there, if you have a problem, you actively go there or you seek there for some sort of guidance if you run into a bit of problems. And now to have the state follow you wherever you go now, with any country, even if you've resided there, is, I mean, putting it politely, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And I really do think that these sort of institutions shouldn't be allowed. They should not be allowed in Western countries who believe in democracy, or whatever that means nowadays. Once again, it's kind of blurred now. So yeah, we just have to see this story unravel, really, and hopefully find a good solution to getting rid of it.
Well, what powers? I'm a little bit behind the curve with this. What powers will these CCP police stations have? I mean, do they have arrest powers? Do they have?
What they're saying is at the moment is that it's to follow criminals that have come from China or Chinese criminals. But as you know, what defines a criminal? Like it could be.
It's under a guise.
Some kind of. But then it kind of normalised that, and then it changes. It's like it'd be like us saying, right, we have Albanians, criminal gangs in England. Let's set up an Albanian police. Well, shouldn't the Canadian police be sorting out any
People in
criminal
Canada.
in Canada? And then why are they setting up, different nationalities having their police do?
Yeah.
I wonder how open the Chinese would be to having a UK police station over there.
Well, not very. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what Interpol was there for. Anyway.
Exactly.
That was the whole point of that.
Yes.
It is very strange, and it does set a precedent. So further down the line, what do you do if you say you're in in a Middle Eastern country and you feel oppressed or whatever, as a woman, for instance, and so you come to the UK, thank goodness I can take this off and all that sort of stuff, and then oh no, we're opening. Police stations here, and actually you have to abide by the rules back home that you've escaped from.
That's extraordinary, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
But I think, to me, this when you look at these individual issues, there's right behind it, there's the reason. It's what you were saying earlier about Trudeau having admiration for the CCP and what's going on in China. And I've seen that interview from some time ago. I think the reason is that we have a complete dearth in Western leadership of honourable Democrats. I really believe that. I think at the heart of almost every government, nobody is sticking up for fundamental principles in a loud voice. And I hate to say it, but when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the only person in the world that says they'll broker peace talks is Trump.
Right.
What is that about?
And there's been silence since then, hasn't there? There's been no talk about it whatever since he said it. Very few media outlets picked it up. No one else has ever offered to step in.
No. But in terms of the Canadian thing, in terms of the Canadian thing, we know why, but Trudeau's position as the Premier of Canada is to say to the CCP, we run our own affairs here.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
I
know. This is Canada. That's what I'm saying. These people like Trudeau and Hearn, Macron and many others have absolutely no democratic principles in their blood at all. None.
No. We should have gone back to them and said Davos runs Canada, not China.
Exactly. It's so blatantly obvious. And we have a prime minister who's on the WF page. What does that? Just join the dots for heaven's sake.
Absolutely. Imagine they're all on that page, aren't they?
Well, they are.
No matter who you vote for, it's one of them, isn't it? Because you've brought up Russia, Ukraine, that's an interesting kind of way to go then. I mean, this morning I was in the gym and you got the televisions just in the background, all just pumping out fear and propaganda constantly. And all of them were at this point talking about the Crimean bridge being blown up, and then obviously these strikes on Ukraine by Russia. And every single person they spoke to was Ukrainian. Every single one on all the channels. There was literally no balance there. There wasn't a single Russian person interviewed. It's extraordinary.
One of the things. Sorry, Karen.
No, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, what I don't understand is in 1963, I think it was, when the Cuban crisis happened, everybody applauded America because everybody felt it was right, that it was a threat to their border security to have Russian military installations on Cuba, because its proximity to America was too close. So the NATO and the Western allies have been leading Zelensky, that idiot, and Ukraine down this kind of rosy path towards, EU membership or NATO membership or whatever it is. And now they wonder why Russia's got a problem with it. But of course Russia's got a problem with it. It's on their border. It's a security issue. I don't understand. I mean, all I can think is the West is absolutely, Western powers and NATO are completely dazzled by their dislike of Russia and their hatred of Putin in particular. And they will do absolutely anything and lie about anything to make sure he's finished. That's all I can think.
So I said this at the start, and obviously the name calling start. Have you been called, because you're coming from a rational point of view and trying to explain history? Have you had the same kind of experience where they've said, right, you're a Russian shill, you're, all of that?
Putin sympathiser.
Yeah, in one day on socials we go to being far right, said Fred, loony left, elitist.
Illuminati,
and what else? Recently we were transphobic. Yeah, exactly. It happens, and it all happens in space of 24 hours. And I'm sure you guys get the same thing. It's just name calling to try and diffuse any adult debate.
Yeah, I think the Ukrainian-Russian thing is really weird, but I think it leads us back to the whole COVID thing and the mainstream media, that whole thing, because it shows us the very narrow focus through which we are expected to receive information. And can you imagine what we would know or not know, I should say, if it wasn't for the internet and all that?
Right.
If it was just, can you imagine the First World War if it had iPhones? The first guy takes an iPhone to the trenches, films it, shows it back home, and everybody says, "Well, I ain't going there."
Oh no!
You can forget it. I ain't going there. Yeah. I'm serious, But it's the lie that encourages people to do what they do. I saw this Canadian actress. I think you might have seen her. She's got she's been paralysed on one side of her face by one of the jabs, and she says, "But I'm going to have the next jab because that's what we're expected to do."
Is she hoping it's just going to take out the other side of her face?
I honestly don't know. But
there's a neighbour of ours who refuses to speak to us, actually, because she's a Daily Mail reader and hates us. But anyway, she's been sadly very ill after her fourth booster, second booster, fourth jab, and now she's sort of got buyer's remorse a little bit, and her comment was, "Well, at least I took one for the team." What does that mean?
What team?
It's crazy.
There is no team.
Because I tell you, if she got injured, they would turn their back straight on her
Yes,
in
they
a
would. Of course they would.
heartbeat.
Took one for the team.
Also, back in the old day, taking one for the team was fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Lewis, going back to Russia, we saw that Putin denounced Zelensky's comments about preemptive strikes. Did you see anyone else denounce his comments for preemptive strikes, or is this would denouncing them mean that you're kind of some extremist who wants peace and peace negotiations?
That's what I find really odd.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
That's all right.
Sorry, mate. I was interrupting. So.
No, you're all good. I think. Where did it go wrong in terms of when did peace become a very extremist point of view? Because can you imagine the Stop the War protesters when Blair was in power? Can you imagine all those protesters being called completely far right and extreme just for wanting peace? So clearly, the powers that be haven't learnt from previous mistakes. So unfortunately, with this, as soon as I saw him, meaning Zelensky, putting out that NATO should reconsider and preemptively strike Russia before they strike them, is not only dangerous, callous, but extremely is reckless. Exactly, completely reckless. And we were told from the start that Ukraine is the defense, that they are the ones defending, and it's a very complicated scenario when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. And it's okay to say that there are bad people on both sides. I think that's very important. And when you denounce Zelensky's idea of preemptive strikes, people are being called the same buzzwords again, Putin sympathizer, for just wanting peace. And that's actually really worrying. And I think we've seen this pattern over time now, all the way since the word conspiracy theory was created by the CIA. You're seeing this pattern of you must conform to the establishment's narrative. And if you stray, that means that you are something else, or you are an opponent or an enemy. And I think that's stifled debate, that's stifled good conversation, and it's extremely worrying. Like I mentioned first off, that even calling for peace is now an extremist view.
When did it become an extremist view, you said at the start? I would say probably around about the same time that My Body, My Choice became an extremist view.
Yes, I agree with that completely.
One of the things, does anybody, I'd like to ask you all actually, are any of you amazed that the West can't see Zelensky for what he is?
It baffles me. I saw it from the start, and I saw, there was propaganda coming out right at the start where we saw the soldiers. They said the soldiers on Snake Island had been killed. That was false. They'd been captured and they were released, and they'd surrendered. We saw video game footage.
Yeah, that was extraordinary.
And obviously, people now have been killed, but they put out some really highly charged, emotive messaging at the start that just made everyone jump on it without any kind of thought, the same way people were dropping dead in China from COVID.
Yeah. And they've done the same, with the whole anti-vaxxers thing, that, you're killing granny, you're putting people's lives at risk. And by doing that, they take away people's sympathy for you. Because people go, I feel sorry for them. They're being quite horrible to that lot. And it's like, well, yeah, but that lot are killing granny. Oh, yeah, screw them. And it's kind of the same. If you speak out against Zelensky, then but look what the Russians are doing. I heard some conversation. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was saying, did you see they were saying how Russian soldiers were raping babies in front of the mothers and stuff? And I was thinking, really? Because that just sounds to me much like, the stories of babies being taken out of incubators and killed and stuff like that by Saddam's forces, which obviously never happened. It just didn't happen. Right. But it creates this emotion that you're like, oh my God, they're doing what? Oh, bomb them. And that's kind of what they want, isn't it? They want people to go, okay, go for it.
But it's a little bit like, when we sent Chamberlain to talk to Hitler, it was sending a bloke with a knife to a gunfight. It's a complete nonsense. You have to understand what you're up against. And I think that I'm not a huge Trump fan overall, but one thing I think he's a street fighter, and he understands Zelensky much more than the idiot Biden does. I really do believe that. I think you need to have a street fighter who understands what that guy is. And we were talking the other week about, if you remember when David Cameron, I think it was in the early days of his campaigning for the leadership of the Tory party, he chained his bike up to a bollard. Right?
I remember this well, yeah.
Remember this? Now, that's a guy who doesn't know the world. He doesn't know anything. That's a guy who cannot be trusted. He doesn't even think you can just lift the bike up and take it because he's so daft.
Also disconnected.
And disconnected from real life. And that's what we're dealing with Zelensky, I think. And Johnson is a Bullingdon Club clown who goes there and doesn't see the street fighter in front of him, doesn't see the criminal in front of him, the joke, which is what he is. I've seen clips of that idiot playing the piano with his penis. And the guy is a joke.
That's clever, though, let's be honest.
It is clever. It's an end of the pier act. I think it's good. But it's not the kind of leadership we're looking for.
No.
No. I mean, I had questions about Zelensky early doors because, you're in one of the poorest countries in Europe. You're a comedian and you're worth goodness knows how much money. Astronomical amounts of money that you simply can't amass from comedy. So what have you been doing then? How did you get that funding? And for what end?
Also, the mainstream media were all over it 3 or 4 years ago. calling him out for being a Nazi and supporting Azov, and suddenly that's all gone. Apparently, all that investigative journalism means nothing now because they've changed the narrative.
I think back in the day, Ukraine as a country was considered to be the most corrupt nation in Europe.
Yeah.
To me, the whole thing smacks of a complete distraction. We're being told one thing, and even the people that are telling us this, they know the truth. This is all about getting rid of Putin and all about teaching Russia a lesson. Yeah.
Well, but if you want, one world this, one world that, which is definitely what it's all about, you can't have superpowers. That just doesn't work. And so you can see how they want to destroy Russia. And then on the other hand, you've got the states basically being destroyed from within by having, a geriatric in charge who's he doesn't know what day it is.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. So confused. But going from one kind of path of brainwashing to another, just another one. Let's talk. Do you think Sharon Osbourne should get her money back? Because she donated a huge amount to BLM, but now suddenly says that she realizes Kanye West is right and it is a scam.
I would think on the donation page there's probably some sort of disclaimer. I would think. I've never seen it.
Yeah.
But I would think they've got their asses covered. I think so. I don't blame her for being pissed off, but no one extracted it from her account. She gave it willingly.
Well, I made my demonstration because when I bought a box of Yorkshire tea, and the company that makes Yorkshire tea celebrated their commitment to BLM, I sent the tea back.
That must have ruined them.
And did you get you're a racist?
No, I didn't actually. No, I didn't. We don't talk about the BLM much because I just think I agree with Kanye West. All lives matter. White lives matter. Black lives matter. They all matter.
Yeah.
So I'm with Kanye West on this, and I never really whether she should get her money back. I don't know really.
It's difficult.
It's difficult. Yeah.
I suppose if it's taken under false pretenses, you could argue that.
Yeah.
But then they didn't steal it from her. I don't know. I don't know what the law is on that.
No, but if they misuse the funds, there is that issue.
Well, there's a lot of evidence to show they may have done.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that whole thing was such a brilliant scam.
Yeah.
And to sort of feed on people's sense of guilt and trying to do the right thing and all that kind of stuff. It was a brilliant scam. Whether she should get the money back, I don't know. I agree with Fred. I think that there must be something in the small print that says you will not get your money back. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, as an organisation, it's clever though, because just the name Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can't disagree with that. Of course they do.
No, you can't.
So you're from the start. You're going to have people on your side,
Yeah.
and obviously they've gone out, and there's so many well-meaning people involved, even within the organisation. I imagine it's just those that at the top that are buying mansions that obviously know exactly what they're doing.
It's a hard one for me because I lived in America for 17 years, and when the riots first happened is when I first spoke out and said this is an utter scam, because I lost half my friends in America because when BLM went through and there was looting and massive riots in Los Angeles, half my friends were trying to rationalize it all and say, and just say, basically just rationalize completely destroying Los Angeles and other places. And then I got called a racist for saying, but I don't agree with I agree Black Lives Matter, the statement, but I don't agree with the organisation and the way they're going about anything. So I got absolutely battered for it. But what do you think now that Sharon Osbourne's done a U-turn, Lewis? Should we be celebrating that people can say, look, I hold my hands up, it might be a year and a half later, but I hold my hands up and I was wrong and I see it for what it is now?
I think there's an element of, thank God you can finally see it. But I think a part of me actually just says you reap what you sow. Because, a lot of people were banging the drums saying, hang on a minute, no, this is a neo-Marxist extremist organisation that is looking to play identity politics for money. I remember writing an article back in 2021 with a company called Red Liberty Media, who are like an American Republican company. And I wrote about Patrisse Cullors, the leader, and how she bought an airfield with the money that she was given. And so it wasn't just mansions, it was actual airfields as well. So when you present that sort of thing to other people and you say, well, where did she get the money from to be able to afford an airfield? I got the same name calling. Oh, you're racist, you don't care about black people and oppression to black people and things like
safe
that.
landings.
It's draining. Like I said earlier about the patterns, it's the same thing. And these extremist left wing, unfortunately, on the left, far left organisations, who have, of course, infected the institutions and many things of what we see nowadays. But with these extremist organisations, they're very good at poisoning the well. Like Gareth just mentioned about the name of it. Black Lives Matter. No one's going to disagree with that. Exactly. But it's about poisoning the well before you're even about to have a conversation. I remember when Nigel Farage was on LBC and he got fired for even speaking about it and just saying that they're a Marxist organisation and they shouldn't be trusted. So a lot of people lost a lot of friends during 2020, including myself, unfortunately, for just speaking out and just telling the truth about what's going on. Yeah. And it's such a bloody shame.
I got private messages. I remember getting a private message from an old friend because I'd called out the organisation. But because people associate the organisation with the name, like we're talking about, and how it's such a powerful phrase, because like you say, you can't disagree with that unless you've got an issue. And so they messaged me just saying, like, but I know you, like, this isn't how you think, like, what's happened to you, basically, as if I'd kind of just become a maniac. So I'm calling out the organisation for what is now, it's shown to be to most people. Even Sharon Osbourne can see it. Do you know what I mean? But what got me in terms of it being quite sinister was a young lad. Now maybe he was misguided in doing this, but he'd seen that all the footballers were all taking a knee and all this kind of stuff, and everyone's got to take a knee, this sort of subjugation thing, and he'd had enough of it. So him and his girlfriend, they flew a plane, or they hired a plane to go over. I think it was the Etihad. I think Manchester City's ground. And it just said, all lives matter. That's what it said, all lives matter. I remember this, yes. And they both got sacked from their job. They were hounded. The media found them, doxed them, and they lost their jobs. I think one of them even I think she might have even been kicked out of college or kicked out of uni or something. It's in something as insane as that for using the phrase, all lives matter. And you go, but how can the term Black Lives Matter be you can't disagree with that, but you can disagree with all lives matter?
Yes.
Well, it's a bit. One thing. I'm just going to very, very quickly. What's interesting about the Kanye West thing, with his White Lives Matter T-shirt and all that, is that Adidas are now reconsidering his sponsorship.
That's right. Yeah.
You can't. I mean, where have we got to in this moral maze, where stating the obvious has become an issue? I don't.
That's going back to the Ukraine-Russia thing, where if you call for peace, you're an extremist.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
This is just this is upside down Orwellian madness.
Yeah, it is absolutely.
And the fact that your friend actually messaged you to say, "I know you, and you don't think this way. What's going on?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't think that way. You're not racist.
I don't think that way.
I think that's the thing with me being in America. I knew that I saw BLM as the organisation. I never saw it as like the phrase. I knew the phrase being taken over by the corrupt, scammy organisation. So,
but also wasn't it? It was also the degree to which George Floyd, as an individual, was deified and sainted.
Yeah.
And you look into his background; he's not that kind of guy at all. It was just used for a kind of political machine, and we were getting into such muddy waters philosophically and morally, I think, and it was stifling. You couldn't see the wood for the trees. It was bizarre.
And what was the weirdest thing? That it was to commemorate or to see that you would go into Nike or a shop and steal a handbag or a pair of trainers because that apparently helped.
Yeah,
During the riots, go in, set some places on fire because it was mental. It was just mental.
It's a bit like pouring all that stuff over the statue to Colonel Tom in a demonstration against private planes. It's just
none of it makes sense.
No,
it doesn't. It doesn't.
None of it makes sense. It's insane.
I must admit, with the George Floyd situation, I kind of looked at that and I thought, that's horrific that this has happened. And then it didn't take long for me, and bear in mind I'm not, an investigative journalist and I'm not a police officer, but I looked into it and it took 5 minutes to uncover the fact that him and the guy used to work together for about 14 years, that they'd had disagreements in the past and stuff like that. And I was thinking, why is no one, don't get me wrong, it's horrific what's happened. But has it happened because of the colour of his skin, or has it happened because there's previous there?
You can't ask that question.
No one was open to talk about it. And when you would bring it up, you would get, almost accused of kind of almost trying to brush it under the carpet and say, oh, no, it's a question worth asking.
I agree. There are certain questions you can't ask anymore.
No, that's right. This is the same with immigration, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't discuss, is the current immigration, is it policy or is it just bad management? If you say anything like that, you're a racist and you're anti this, or the whole thing is just insane. The open debate is currently on its arse.
Yeah, it is. And it's what, I think it was Voltaire that said it, I disagree with what you say, but I'll give my life for you, defend you with my life for the right to say it.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's what we've forgotten. At the moment, right now, we're in a culture where if you disagree with somebody, you deplatform them and you don't listen. And interestingly enough, when Nigel Farage was in Australia, it was the Antifa left that went in and tried to stop the event. And the left, I personally think the left has a much longer history in stifling debate than the right.
It is strange, I must admit. I've watched them kind of turn on their darlings a little bit over Russia-Ukraine, actually. Like John Pilger was an absolute darling of certain aspects of the left. And because he's not he's not gone to the cult of Zelensky, he's getting pelters for that.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, you have to agree with the whole thing when you're in the left, don't you? You can't have any kind of disagreement with anything. It has to be the full narrative. Well, get out of
exactly.
it.
Exactly. And also, life is too complicated now. There's not one. It's rather like when you see people talking about the left or the right in the UK and Truss and the Labour Party. It doesn't matter. None of that matters, because the issues we're facing are much bigger than either of those two parties are capable of dealing with.
Yeah. It's like the whole Partygate thing. People just got sidetracked by that. It's just theatre.
Oh, the press dumped it, didn't they? And I think I'm not a Johnson fan, but there was definitely a campaign to get rid of him. They didn't like him at all.
The campaign to get rid of Truss now.
Yeah,
no. But they never asked the question with Partygate, the big question, which was, if they had access to all the scientists and all the data and everything else before we did, why were they happy to hang out, drink wine and chill and not be frightened of the virus? No one ever asked that question.
Neil Oliver was right when he said that they knew it didn't matter.
That's right.
Yeah,
they knew.
Of course they did.
Yeah.
Of course they did. But
exactly.
It's flown by, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. But thanks for coming on this week. It's been great talking to you.
Pleasure. Yeah, we've really enjoyed it.
And you.
Nice to meet you, Lewis. And Lon.
Thank you.
And
Well,
you.
a big
Thank you very
thanks
much.
to you. Big thanks to you, Fred, Richard and Lewis. And always, if you'd like to add to the conversation, leave a comment below. We'll see you all next week.
Exactly.
Goodbye.